What's going on, world? My name is Hobson McCain,
My name is Mark Ray Randall.
and we're back at it again with This Is America. We're coming at you today with the international news segment. Um, in the international world, specifically regarding America, we have recently had a Supreme Court ruling that upheld Donald Trump's travel ban. Um, some of you guys may have known it as the Muslim ban back in the election times 2016 because Donald Trump called it a Muslim ban and said that he wanted to ban all Muslims, and there were seven predominantly Muslim countries. So this is big news just because it speaks a lot to the state that America is in. I think if you look at the Supreme Court justices, they're split 5-4, five conservatives, four Democrats, and the vote for this ruling was 5-4, five conservatives, four Democrats. And it's been ruled that way a dozen times in the past year, at different Supreme Court rulings. So we're obviously in a very partisan state right now, and with a lot of the comments that were made behind this travel ban, this is not a good look internationally, especially to some of our potential friends and potential enemies in the Middle East, and in more predominantly Muslim areas. Um, so, Mark, you want to say anything introductory?
I'm not. I'm not a fan of the entire idea of this Muslim ban, nor am I a fan of the fact that the Supreme Court has put their stamp of approval on it. Now, first things first, the Supreme Court has made mistakes before. In 1944, I think during World War II, they ruled that it was okay for us to imprison Japanese Americans because of a national security threat. Very similar to what they're doing right now, and it doesn't really, to me, seem like a legitimate issue. Like, they were Japanese Americans, and here we're telling people, well, the people coming here for asylum, like, they're political refugees. That's literally what coming here for asylum stands for. Like, you're a political refugee, which is pretty much the same thing as what we, say that the founding fathers of America were. They came here looking for freedoms, for, religious freedom, yada, yada, yada. They're trying to come here for a myriad of reasons. Like, there's reasons for them to be coming here.
Yeah. So the court ruled that Trump's anti-Muslim statements during the campaign did not justify evidence of religious discrimination. I don't understand that really. Me, I'm not a Supreme Court justice, but when you say that you're going to ban all Muslims from a country, people who practice the Islamic faith are Muslims. That seems like you're discriminating. You're. I don't want to use the word discriminating because that's kind of like just me saying
No,
he's racist. But yeah, you're discriminating who can come into the country based on their religion, and that's obviously what the travel ban began as.
for me, I'm not even, like, I understand that it's been coined as a Muslim ban, but reading, like, the wording of the actual law, they don't mention the word Muslim's not said, nor are any of the seven countries mentioned. The countries involved, this has kind of like been the conservatives' argument against saying that Donald Trump is, the one behind this. In 2015, I want to believe after the San Bernardino attack and the Paris attacks, Barack Obama put in a law that, we have to, people that are seeking asylum from certain countries that were considered a risk have to apply for their visas through the United States specifically. Like, they can't have a sponsor that's not American. They have to have a visa from the United States.
Yeah,
Big deal in, in other countries, but he didn't necessarily tell them that they couldn't come here. He just said that we have to vet you ourselves and see if you're a national security threat or not. Donald Trump took that same list and said, we don't want anybody coming here, period. And there's a period at the end of the sentence. And that's what the difference comes in. And that's where it becomes discriminatory, because now you're saying that it's not that we are worried about national security risks from specific people, we're just gonna ban all of you because we don't want any of you to come over here. That to me is an argument that you shouldn't be having. Like that's an argument that we shouldn't accept. And to me, as a black man, it to me seems very, very racist. I don't like to use that word like a lot to describe laws because that's very, very like condemning. But to tell someone that they can't come to this country based on their nationality, not their religion, their nationality, where they're a citizen of, that's your basis for telling them they can't come here, that's discrimination.
Yeah, and just so all you guys know, the policy originated and the Donald Trump administration just wanted a complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. That's what the first proposed travel ban, was just a complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Now that to me seems like religious discrimination.
That's religious discrimination.
Then that got shut down by federal courts around the country, from Hawaii to Virginia, I think. And then they changed it to where now, instead of the all Muslims being banned from entering the country, they changed it to 7 countries that were predominantly Muslim. This got shot down by federal courts, and so now they've changed it many a times. And so, the original countries were Iraq, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. So they've changed it to where now the countries that are being banned is Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Chad, North Korea, and Venezuela. Now, just so that this argument isn't made, North Korea and Venezuela aren't even being like that isn't what the Supreme Court was meeting about. They weren't discussing the ban from North Korea and Venezuela because obviously they're not a part of any sort of affiliation with the Islamic faith or even that region. But Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and Chad are all predominantly Muslim countries. So those are the countries that were being examined by the Supreme Court, or the ban of those countries, and trying to determine whether or not it was discriminatory or based upon it was based on religious reasons. Now, the 4 liberal justices, they said that you can obviously see that the ban started off based on religious reasons because of what Donald Trump said. A complete shutdown. The quote is, Donald J. Trump is calling for a total, complete shutdown of Muslims entering the U.S.
I don't understand how you can not understand what he's saying.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a bit confusing how 5 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices can honestly sit there and put their hand on the Bible and say that they don't see anything discriminatory or racially or religiously discriminatory about this instance. To me, they're just ignoring it. They're choosing not to see it because they were appointed by Republican presidents, and that's where their allegiance is to. That's who they're trying to think of the right word. That's where their loyalty lies.
Yeah,
and that's an issue because their loyalty should not lie to a party. It should lay with the American people and trying to do what's right. Because going back, this is a part of what I wanted to mention earlier. When Obama put his law into place, I'm not going to excuse his law either because it was put into place to kind of stop terrorism from taking place here. And to understand terrorism, you got to think about the mind of a terrorist. Terrorist is not a terrorist in the country that he lives in. He's an activist because he's trying to invoke social change. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
People don't do too many terrorist attacks in the United States. The number one terrorist attacks that we have here are domestic terrorists. We don't really have terrorism from overseas coming here. The biggest incident that we can think of is 9/11. That's the biggest one that we've had. We've produced numerous 9/11s overseas.
Yeah.
That's the reason that we're not the most well-liked over there. We do a lot. Barack Obama did a lot over there. Now Donald Trump's trying to ban all of them. trying to seek asylum and trying to get away from the issues that we have had a hand in creating. Now we're saying that those issues are yours. You did that to yourself. Leave us alone. We don't have anything to do with it. That to me is messed up. It just doesn't make any sense for us to have our hand in everything that they're doing up until this point, and then say, now we don't want any refugees to come here. We don't want any of you to come here because we think that it's a national security threat for us. And we're doing it to stop terrorism. We don't want terrorism to rear its head in the United States. But with moves like this, banning an entire region, banning 7 countries based on their religion or based on their nationality, that in itself is going to give rise to more opposition from those countries. They're not going to like the way that we're handling the situation. And that's going to create more terroristic issues, if that's the way that you want to describe it.
And one of the big, writing points for the Trump administration was that they had a fear that Muslims in those areas, those countries that we mentioned, that they have innate fear and hatred towards the U.S. And just like Mark said, historically speaking, I'm going to premise this with saying this. Terrorism is about perspective. When people, this is iffy territory to get into, because I know that you can clip this anyway and make it seem crazy, but I'm going to say it regardless. Let's say that we had another terrorist attack and somebody came over and, bombed a building in Atlanta, let's say. The people who support that person, to them, they are not terrorists. They wouldn't say, yes, our terrorist did a great thing in Atlanta. No, they would say, our soldiers went over and are fighting for our liberation from the West. Maybe. And keep in mind, these are the radicals. These are not the average Muslim. The average Muslim, Islam preaches peace and love and acceptance of different people and differences. So these are radical Muslims that we're talking. Go ahead.
This is, perilous territory, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. I minored in religion at the school. I can honestly say this is facts that we need to stop making this big differentiation between Islam and Christianity as far as the division, because I understand that we have 2 different New Testaments. The Christianity has the New Testament, Islam has the Quran, and Judaism has the Torah. But they all share the same Old Testament, meaning they all have the same God in theory. So we need to stop demonizing one another. We need to stop demonizing each other, making it seem like we're not brothers in religion, in a respect. And to me, for us to use that belief system as the basis for us going against our belief systems, which both preach peace, to me seems kind of contradictory. And that's why there's so much tension between the 2 groups. That's why there's so much tension between us and the Middle East, because we're kind of creating issues where there are none and then blaming them for them.
Yeah, and this isn't to say that there aren't any radical Islamists or something like that, but at the same time there are radical Christians, the KKK. So if Iran were to fly over here, drop down 1 million soldiers and start bombing our cities, saying that radical Christians were, oppressing African Americans, then we would look at them and say, oh my goodness, they're terrorists. They're coming in and trying to kill our people for no reason. That's what the government would say. That's what everybody would say. So when we do the same thing over there, and this is not to say that we need to there are some bad things happening in the Middle East. But at the same time,
step up like Donald Trump. I agree when he took a stance against the gas attacks in Syria. That's not okay. And we need to step in if something like that happens. And he did the right thing in that instance. Yeah,
but we need to make sure that we are targeting the individuals who are perpetuating these actions and not targeting the citizens who are victims of these actions. And the people who are trying to come to the United States, if we're going to implement travel restriction, like you said with the Obama administration, and you had to apply for a visa through the United States so that we could check your background, check the likelihood that you are going to come over here and do something radical like that, then that would make sense. Because if you really are, you really need to leave that country, then applying through the U.S. shouldn't be that much of a leap and a bound. But to say that
We understand.
nobody from those countries can come over here and say it's not religiously motivated when the Trump administration said multiple times during the campaign that these first, that they need to ban all Muslims, second, that these Muslim countries were high areas where there was a lot of terrorist activity. You know, if 2% of the population are radical Islamists, and then 1% of the population is actually acting on these radical thoughts, then should we punish the 98% that are victims of this radical thought? I don't know. And if we keep them from coming over here, don't you think the chances that they're more susceptible to that radical thought and that radical hatred of the West, you don't think that's going to be perpetuated through the fact that they have to continue living in those conditions? It's kind of a cycle, and it's going to create a lot more enemies than it does friends. It's not going to create any friends, period. So,
with the actions that we're taking, we're breeding terrorism. We're giving birth to new extremists when we give them fuel to the fire. And banning the entire country, I don't understand what more fuel they need to look at us differently.
Yep. And just to reiterate, we're not advocating for the terrorists. The people who, are coming over and really want to harm American citizens, we would never, ever in our lives say that, yes, you should let them over anyway. No, not at all. Yeah, ISIS is bad, Al-Qaeda is bad, but we had a large hand in putting those groups into power. We don't want to talk about that. We militarized these people, trained them, gave them weapons, supplies, to overthrow another regime. But then when they took power and had their own crazy ideas, we got mad at them. So, we have to acknowledge our fault in the situation, while at the same time realizing that if there's a humanitarian crisis going on somewhere and people want to come to what is supposedly known as the greatest country in the world, where there's the least amount of humanitarian crisis going on, we shouldn't deny people that pleasure if they go through the right process. A lot of people, we'll talk about immigration in another episode, but a lot of the arguments on immigration is if you're going to come to this country legally, then that's fine. Well, now you just banned 8 different countries from even having that option. So
you leave them only one.
Yeah, which is to rise up and fight a war themselves that they're not trained to fight, or if you can't beat them, join them. So, with that, we don't support terrorism.
Terrorism is bad.
We also don't support the travel ban. And we feel like there's other ways that you could go about it. If you guys disagree, agree, like we always say, comment below. We love all of your comments. They're awesome. Leave us some suggestions for next week. You say?
Like and share.
Share, yeah.
Like and share.
Like and share. Educate your friends too. But yeah, so we're gonna catch up with y'all next time. Be easy.